the intro music. Yeah! Woohoo!
Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today, taking a look at crews again, but I want to do another shift in how we approach it, because when we go into our crewing videos, sometimes we focus on bad crews, sometimes we focus on good crews, sometimes we just kind of go whatever. And I wanted to have a targeted focus here because of incursions. Now, incursions has gone through 2 iterations so far, and there's another iteration coming at some point. I'm not allowed to tell you when, but I can tell you that it's going to be slightly different than what you've already seen. So I'm curious to see how that plays out. Now, because of this, I think it's a good time for us to look over certain crews. And the focus of this crewing video is to focus on crews that are good crews that still lose and explain why. Because the tricky thing about PvP in this game is it's all about who you're fighting and what's going on during that. You know, there's even instances for me personally that I had some massive victories based on me using exocomps in combination with my Cerritos buffs and just making myself strong enough to punch higher than I normally would. But there's other things that go into all that. So I wanted to take a look at that in today's video with examples such as this one. Just like, I like suspense. Suspense is fun. So in this one, this is actually a good crew. Many of you might look at this and go, what the heck is this? This looks wild and terrible. Well, the actual crew on the right is an exploration crew. Now, this has nothing to do with PvP, but because it's unique and you don't see it very often, I wanted to mention it. You know, there was a time in the game where the only thing that you could do to increase warp range was Cadet Scotty, who is actually over there. But with an explorer ship, you also have TOS Scotty, who helps with warp range on explorers. And then, of course, the new character, Mr. Grush. Who doesn't love Mr. Grush? In fact, Grush is a card that I use all the time on my own sets. I typically use it for his captain's ability. And if I'll transition the screen real quick, we'll go down and take a look at Grush from that perspective. But he is still a good card to use, and I can't wait for Syndicate to get expanded a little bit and have more officers here. But just here, it increases warp range of the ship by 10% if you've got him leveled up, which you can see I've got him leveled up a little bit because, well, been going through my Syndicate. And even though Syndicate feels like it needs a little more love, maybe soon, but I've been working on Grush. So anyway, not a bad officer set. Let's put it back on the screen. But that's what you have here. You're going full fly out there and explore. This, if anything, is a more true, pure-hearted, like next generation type crew, because it's all about exploration, not about damage. But it's also why the Saladin easily wins. But it's not a bad crew. And this also gives you an example of what you can use out there as a player to get yourself a little bit more warp range. Maybe this player is trying to get deeper into faction space so they can relocate and maybe do some mining of 3-star materials, or maybe they're just trying to explore. Whatever the case is, good crew just simply doesn't work for what you're trying to do right now. Now let's rotate to a PvP crew. Good crew still loses. Why? So we have a D4 here easily trouncing a Enterprise. Now we talk all the time about the Enterprise. It's so OP. It's the greatest ship in the game. And the Enterprise is in fact a fantastic PvP ship, but here it loses. The question is why? Well, let's take a look at the crews. So the D4 is running a critical build mixed with piercing. So the goal is 3 layers. 1, Marcus, get your piercing up to collapse the Enterprise's mitigation. 2, we're running a critical build with Honor Guard Worf. And 3, we're building on top of that critical build with Lorca, which is hull breach. So for those that don't remember, you have damage. Then when you have a critical, there's an extra multiplier. So we're going to multiply our damage by our critical. And then finally, hull breach is another multiplier on top of that, thus creating more and more damage. Now, let's take a look at the other side of this. You've got TOS Kirk, TOS Uhura, and Marcus, which is basically an anti-Enterprise crew, which is fine. It's not a bad crew. One slight change could make this battle go a different way potentially, and that is having TOS Uhura as captain. TOS Uhura as captain with TOS Kirk as synergy negates 110% chance of criticals from your opponent. The entire build around the D4 is essentially built around criticals. So having that simple swap could make that go maybe a different way. Either way, you definitely have a huge loss here for a maxed Enterprise, which is big for a lot of people because we all look at the Enterprise as indestructible, amazing. but proof here that you can flip the triangle and even a good crew can lose against a better crew for specifics. And this goes into when I talk about all the time, how it's difficult for me to give y'all crew recommendations. It's always about who you're fighting and what situation that you are in. Let's talk about another one. This is a good one. This one makes me, woo, boom, it's a Pylon going down to a Valdore. Now, we talk all the time, and you've heard a lot of people say, especially spinners, hey, skip the uncommons. There's no need to go after them because you'll get better ships eventually. And there's some truth to that, but you can definitely flip the script with a Valdore versus a Pylon. Now, this one, obviously, we got a little bit of Cerritos buff. We're helping it out. But Yuki, Kirk, and TOS Spock, that one might confuse you a little bit, so we'll talk about it, versus Kang, Honor Guard Worf, and Big Mud. Now, for those of you curious why Big Mud is getting this one right now, let's bring up our officer chart and explain why. Remember, the power of the Pylon a lot of times is, not only is it a great ship, but the firing pattern on the Pylon is really, really good. Now, 823 ways to die is 30% chance to double the shots of all the weapons of the ship for the first round of combat. Now, if this is maxed out and you get that proc, that can be tremendous on a Pylon, which is a front-loaded ship. Most of its weapons are going to fire early on. So if you take advantage of that, you can come out with a pretty significant hit. But what happened here is TOS Spock, if you remember, lowers the amount of critical damage. Now, I love this because it's a little bit nefarious, actually. Because if you have a maxed TOS Spock and then you have a critical hit you, you can actually cause a critical from your enemy to do less damage than a regular shot. How does that work, you might ask? Simple. Let me just explain it like this. So if you have damage, remember we talked about damage is just multiplying damage by your critical. So let's say your critical is 200%. So you would multiply 5 by 2 and you would get 10. Simple as that. But what happens if you drop it below? Example, a maxed TOS Spock, let's say he takes away 150%. So now, instead of having times 2, 200% minus 150% is 50%. What does that mean? That critical, when it procs, instead of giving me a boost, it'd be 5 now times 0.5, so 2.5. I would actually take or deal half the amount of damage because of this crew. Then you've got Yuki, which is giving you shield strip, as well as a bonus versus Romulans. And then we've got the morale proc because of Kirk. So it's actually a brilliant crew. The crew that the Pylon is running is not a bad crew. I must stress this. It is not a bad crew. I must stress this, not a bad crew. And that's the theme of today's video is these crews that I'm showing off are not bad crews. It's simply circumstances of when they launch. I also want to throw in the background real quick to remind you of how TOS Spock works right here. When fighting players, sorry, I didn't mean to kill it. As long as the ship has morale, that was the purpose of having regular Kirk, by the way. So it's a beautiful crew design by the Valdore to punch up in a way that most people would not expect a victory. Now, I will go ahead and add that without the Cerritos buff, this Valdore probably still loses. But this is what I love about this, because I'll have players come to me like, you can't kill a ship twice your strength. Au contraire, you can. Crewing and then taking advantage of exocomps and buffs can make certain things happen, like here. Proof is in the proverbial battle log. So, moving on to another one. You thought a Valdore winning was cool? What about an Enterprise doing the exact same thing with the same logic that we just worked at in another way? So that Pylon is running Yuki, Kang, Honor Guard Worf. Now, nothing wrong with that. That is a little bit more of a generic run. Really more focused on fighting other Pylons is what that Pylon is running. So a 15.8 million Pylon is trying to kill other Pylons. That's the point of having Kang there, to lower the mitigation stats of an opposing Pylon, as well as running a critical build, shield strip, and then bonus versus Romulans. So the Enterprise is able to sneak in here even without a Cerritos buff and win because it's running the same idea. So we're going to allow you to run a critical build, but because we have a high level TOS Spock, which you can get him in transporter patterns to upgrade him for these situations, you're running this with your own critical setup to make it to where normally your Enterprise, not the biggest damage dealer, but today it is, and boom, lo and behold, you get a big stinking victory on a ship almost about 2.5 times stronger, almost 3 times stronger. This usually is what people like, it can't happen. It can. It's all about situations. And if you can determine these fights, and what I notice in incursions PvP is a lot of times, especially in a raid defense, people are going to throw out specific crews, giving you the time to counter them, which is what this Enterprise pilot did. Now I want to move to another one. This is a good crew versus a good crew, but the other Saladin loses. Why? Well, this Saladin with Curon trying for or doing the copy and paste shot. So we're going to get 2 rounds of that big gun. Kang for, remember, piercing. So now that we have more accuracy, that mitigation on the Saladin is going to drop, and then critical. Whereas the one on the right is kind of running a mixed build. They're going for a critical build with Honor Guard Worf, while also trying to keep the shields up, which is a little bit of a mix because the Kirk Spock run is generally seen as a longer fight run, and Honor Guard Worf is more of a short fight card, but it's not a bad crew. But this crew is specifically designed to punch really hard, really fast against interceptors, and that's exactly what it does here. And that's why I was able to easily take down another Saladin, even though they're pretty similarly matched. It doesn't mean, again, this is not an like a call out to anybody. Doesn't mean that the Saladin on the opposite side is badly crewed, but what it does mean is maybe not the most efficient for this fight. And that's the point. That's why the other one is able to win, and you're able to punch up more than you normally are because of these stats. Now, I'm going to put you one out from me. Here's a big one for me that I was able to do. Now, it's not the biggest fight that we've seen here, but this is me punching up and taking down a Kelvin that's not terribly crewed, but it's one of the reasons I'll talk about. Spock is pointless on 4-star ships. And here's a good example. It's not the worst crew, but it's not great. This is the first one I've shown today that's probably a quote-unquote bad crew, but still, it's a ship far stronger than my Enterprise. But I'm able to win by taking about 60% damage, and my Kang is not max. My Kang is actually only tier 4. So that's the purpose of these videos, to hopefully give you a little bit more of an idea of different things that you can try out and run. And remember that battle strength in this game is not the most important. You can punch up twice your strength. And I say only this because I have so many of my friends are like, Rev, these level 42s and 46s coming for me. I can't do anything to stop them. You can. Now, you can't stop the 53s and the 58s because I sure can't. But there are tactics available to you in PvP. And there's also tactics that even level 39 can really frustrate the heck out of a high-level player in base defense. DJ had a great video, and shout out to our friend over on server 14 who put that together. I will eventually do it here on this channel just to show y'all, but we also want to give love to all of our other content creators. If you haven't checked out DJ's channel or his podcast, look up the Talking Trek podcast, which is talkingtrekstfc.com. If you enjoyed this video, do help it out. Like the video and subscribe. Ring the little bell, set it to get all notifications so you know when I go live, as well as when any video gets uploaded. And if you have questions about crewing and PvPing, hit up us here in the comment section, or easiest way, hit me up on Discord. Yeah, just send me a message. I don't mind. I want to hear from you. And I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. Live long and prosper. Stay safe with the Space Cowboys. Deuces. That's me. Catch you on the next video, and we'll see you the next time around. Yes, another incursions is coming, but it might be a little while. Let's see. I can't tell you specifics, but I can hint at things. I like hinting at things. Bye.
An even better outro than the intro. For the Empire and glory to your house.